Hello. In the 1970s, a serial killer emerged in the United States who specialized in hunting and murdering people marginalized by society. His activities spanned over a dozen states, and all his victims were women. For decades, his crimes went undetected until he confessed to them. He then became the most notorious serial killer in the USA. On Wednesday, September 5th, 2012, based on some leads, California police arrested a drug dealer at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky. The suspect was 72-year-old Samuel Little, who had a long criminal record. After his arrest, the police collected his DNA sample and entered it into the national database. It turned out that his DNA matched the perpetrator of 3 unsolved cases in Los Angeles. The first case occurred on July 13, 1987. The victim was named Carol Eileen Elford. She was found dead beside a dumpster in an alley in Los Angeles with multiple bruises on her body and signs of sexual assault before her death. The cause of death was mechanical asphyxia. The second case occurred on September 3, 1987. The victim was named Guadalupe Duarte Apodaca. She was found in an abandoned auto repair shop. Her body also showed signs of sexual assault, and the cause of death was also mechanical asphyxia. The third case occurred on August 14, 1989. The victim was named Audrey Nelson Everett. She was found in a dumpster. Her body also showed signs of sexual assault, and the cause of death was also mechanical asphyxia. The victims in these cases were all sex workers, and their money and valuable possessions were taken. Through DNA evidence, the police determined that the perpetrator was the same person. However, at the time, they could not find a suspect. But now, after DNA testing, they identified Samuel as the murderer. The police launched an investigation into Samuel and discovered that he had a long criminal history, including theft, assault on women, and attempted murder. He had been in and out of prison dozens of times. In January 2013, Samuel was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. The case was tried in the Superior Court in Los Angeles, where prosecutors presented crucial DNA evidence and found a victim from one of his previous attempted murders. Samuel denied all charges and claimed he was innocent. However, his defense was futile against the compelling DNA evidence. On September 25, 2014, after 18 months in custody, Samuel was sentenced to 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. He was then imprisoned at the California State Prison in Los Angeles County, a men's facility. During his incarceration, Samuel continued to assert his innocence and sought appeals, all of which were denied. In May 2018, an investigator in Texas, while investigating a mysterious case, connected Samuel to another case. The victim was Denise Christie Brothers, who lived in Odessa, West Texas. She married at the age of 15, but her husband was an alcoholic and frequently abused her, leading to their divorce. Denise later had 3 more husbands and gave birth to 2 children. However, these marriages also ended in failure. After her final divorce, she lived alone in a motel. Denise had a habit of drinking and was addicted to drugs, resulting in her losing custody of her children. To afford her expensive drug habit, she became a sex worker. One night in January 1994, 38-year-old Denise, under the introduction of a broker, got into a white car and disappeared. A month later, on February 2, 1994, a driver discovered her body in an open field. She was found lying on her back, one hand pinned down, with signs of sexual assault, and the cause of death was mechanical asphyxia. Forensic doctors found semen from several men inside her body, one belonging to the broker and another to a different client, while the identities of the others remained unknown. The police tracked down the 2 men who provided alibis, eliminating them as suspects, turning the case into an unsolved mystery. Over 20 years later, when Texas investigators revisited the case, they believe Samuel might be involved because the perpetrator's modus operandi closely matched his, and Samuel was in Texas at the time of the crime. When investigators went to the prison to question Samuel, he was 78 years old and suffering from chronic illnesses like diabetes and heart disease, with his physical health deteriorating. Samuel frequently complained about the poor conditions in the Los Angeles County Jail and requested a transfer to a better facility, but these requests were always denied. He told investigators that he would cooperate if transferred to another prison and was also willing to testify about other cases. After discussions with 2 FBI agents, Texas investigators reached a plea deal with Samuel, agreeing not to pursue the death penalty as long as he confessed to all his crimes and cooperated with the investigation. Additionally, he would be transferred to a prison in West Texas with much better conditions. After signing the agreement, Samuel's demeanor changed immediately. He took responsibility for the 3 previously unsolved cases in California and also admitted to Denise's murder, recounting some details from the night of the crime. He said he had approached a broker and after some negotiation, the broker contacted Denise asking her to serve Samuel. He used his white car to drive her to a deserted alley, but during the ride, Samuel claimed he was an artist and could paint her a picture. Upon arriving at the deserted alley, they began their transaction, but Samuel suddenly grabbed Denise, pulling her into the back seat while using one hand to strangle her and the other to pleasure himself. Denise struggled fiercely, which only excited Samuel more. He told her, "You will always be mine," and continued to strangle her brutally until she stopped breathing. His description shocked the investigators at the scene, but he didn't stop there. He not only admitted to the 4 cases in front of him, but also revealed many other crimes, including several that were never documented. In the fall of 1982, 42-year-old Samuel killed an African-American woman in New Orleans, Louisiana. The woman was around 30 to 40 years old, about 1.72 meters tall, with brown hair and was wearing a very nice dress. They met at a birthday party, and she told Samuel she was living with her sick mother at home. One night later, Samuel drove her into the woods, strangled her to death, and threw her body into the river. After committing the crime, he left Louisiana and went to Mississippi. In 1993, 53-year-old Samuel was driving a yellow Cadillac in Las Vegas, Nevada. On his way to Los Angeles, he met an American woman around 40 years old, about 1.65 meters tall with short hair but wearing a long wig. This woman was a sex worker with a 20-year-old son. On the day of the incident, Samuel took her to a motel and strangled her to death. He then placed her body in the trunk and drove to the outskirts of Las Vegas, rolling the body down a hillside, but her clothes were thrown farther away. This incident was never recorded, and her body may have never been found. By April 1994, in Little Rock, Arkansas, Samuel encountered another African-American woman approximately 24 years old and 1.7 meters tall. She stayed with him for 3 days, during which they stole from stores multiple times, and she sold the items to get money. Samuel was eventually arrested by the police for shoplifting at a grocery store. After being booked at the police station, he was only fined and released. When he returned, he took the girl to meet her ex-boyfriend before going back to their place. The next day, Samuel invited her to Bentonville, Arkansas, and she agreed. On the way, he drove to a secluded road, murdered her, and dumped her body in a field. In addition to these cases, Samuel admitted that from 1970 to 2005, he had killed a total of 93 people. Most of them were African-American women who were sex workers or marginalized individuals. When asked why he targeted them, he replied that if he entered a white neighborhood and killed a white girl under 20 years old, everyone would know the next day. However, if the victim was an African-American woman, no one might find out. For a long time, when asked about his feelings while killing the victims, he responded, "It felt like I was in heaven, like sleeping with Marilyn Monroe." Marilyn Monroe was a famous American actress, model, and singer known for her seductive beauty. He compared his victims to juicy fruits that he could enjoy anytime without punishment. Everywhere he went was like a vineyard, and the girls were translucent grapes. Wherever he went, he picked a grape and enjoyed it. Samuel was obsessed with the necks of the girls, as all his victims were strangled to death. He had an excellent memory and could recall the victims' appearances clearly, but had a vague sense of time and place, making investigations challenging. Whenever he recounted the details of a case, he became very excited, even able to describe the terror on each victim's face before they died. In his memory, there were nearly 100 victims, some of whom were never recorded by the police. He could even name and accurately describe some victims, and when he couldn't remember a name, he would sketch the victim's portrait to aid the investigation. After investigating, the FBI confirmed that over 50 cases were related to Samuel. The other cases were still unidentified, and some victims had yet to be found. The police were also unsure if the actual number of cases he mentioned was accurate. By December 2018, Samuel was transferred to Texas to stand trial for Denise's case. Including the 3 previous life sentences, Samuel was sentenced to a total of 4 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Sometimes Samuel was only in prison for a few months, and sometimes he was released after winning court cases. Samuel's first murder occurred on New Year's Eve in 1970. He went to a bar in Miami and saw 33-year-old Mary Broley, a professional sex worker, sitting with her legs crossed, stroking her neck. Samuel felt intrigued by this action and thought it was a sign from God. He and Mary agreed to drive to a wasteland near a secluded swamp. After ensuring no one was around, Samuel strangled Mary with his hands. This was his first crime, so he was very frightened afterward and buried Mary's body in a forest near the crime scene. 3 weeks later, a man hunting with his son discovered a decomposing woman's body in the forest. They called the police, but the victim's face was unrecognizable, and the cause of death could not be determined due to the high blood alcohol level. The victim was estimated to be between 30 and 40 years old and had been buried for about 2 months. The police took the victim's fingerprints but found no matches in the records and could not identify her. The police speculated that the victim might have accidentally died while drunk, and the case was not considered a murder. That woman was Mary. After staying in Miami for a while and with no news about the murder, Samuel knew that he had escaped the clutches of the law. From then on, a human demon was born, and he had also found a target for his future actions. After the trial, Samuel cooperated with the investigative authorities to reveal all the crimes he had committed in October 2019. According to the FBI's announcement, Samuel was identified as the most notorious serial killer in the history of the USA. They published more than 30 sketches based on Samuel's description in the hope that someone could help identify the victims he had killed. This case was considered the biggest case in the history of the United States and involved many victims over a wide area. Samuel Little was born in June 1940 in the town of Reynolds, Georgia, USA. His mother was a prostitute and drug addict who was arrested for prostitution at the age of 16 and gave birth to Samuel in prison. His father's identity is unknown as he did not want to have a child, so after his mother became pregnant, she tried to abort the baby by tying a rope tightly around her abdomen, but she was unsuccessful. A few months after Samuel was born, his mother was released from prison on a rainy night and abandoned Samuel on a remote dirt road. Samuel was found by a kind neighbor in Lorain County, Ohio, and was sent to be raised by his grandmother. When Samuel was in kindergarten, he was touched on the neck by a teacher, which haunted him with that feeling. When he was in elementary school, Samuel saw a teacher constantly touching her own neck in class, which made him feel like he wanted to kill. In Samuel's bedroom, there was a picture taken from a crime magazine. It was an image of a girl being strangled to death. From then on, Samuel's academic performance deteriorated. Samuel's family was very poor, so the adults in the house were often busy dealing with the daily cost of living and had little time to care about Samuel's studies. As a result, Samuel dropped out of school and joined a notorious local gang. Here, Samuel often drank, caused disturbances, and became addicted to drugs, and to earn money to spend, he gradually started to steal from stores. In 1953, when he was only 13 years old, Samuel was arrested for the crime of stealing a bicycle, after which he was sent to a reform school for juveniles. Here, Samuel often got into fights with his peers and was punished more than 40 times for various disciplinary infractions. However, the reform school seemed unable to rehabilitate him. After leaving the school, Samuel continued his life of theft until 1956, when at the age of 16 he was arrested again for theft and sentenced to prison. Upon release, Samuel drifted around continuing to steal and taking on odd jobs to survive. In 1961, he was arrested again and sentenced to 3 years in prison for burglary. During his time in prison, Samuel discovered a passion for boxing and art, even becoming a middleweight boxing champion. In 1964, at the age of 24, Samuel was released from prison a few months early. He then wandered across USA, living an itinerant lifestyle. After a few years at his mother's urging, he went to live with her in Miami, Florida. Here, from 1964 to 1975, he worked as a cemetery guard and an emergency medical technician. However, during his 11 years in Miami, Samuel was unable to abandon his life of theft and violence. He assaulted women in Denver, solicited prostitutes in Bakersfield, stole in Portland and Philadelphia, and drove drunk in Los Angeles. Over and over, Samuel was arrested 26 times across 11 states for crimes such as theft, assault, trespassing, fraud, and attacking government officials. Samuel's story shows how a lack of family guidance and support coupled with difficult circumstances can push someone down a criminal path. This highlights the importance of caring for and educating children, especially those in challenging situations, to prevent them from following a deviant course. This is the story of Samuel, a man who always targeted victims on the fringes of society to commit his crimes. In 1974, he killed a 34-year-old black woman named Martha Cunningham on her way to church in Tenney. Martha's body was brutally attacked with many bruises, and all her valuables were missing. The police concluded that her death was due to epilepsy, but this was actually one of the murders Samuel had committed while wandering across the western and southern USA, committing dozens of crimes. Samuel then began dating a black woman named Aurelia Jean Dorsey, who was also a seasoned thief almost 30 years older than him. The two roamed throughout the Midwest and South, living off thefts and odd jobs. In one instance, in September 1976, Samuel was caught trying to kill a girl outside St. Louis, Missouri. Fortunately, the girl managed to run to a nearby house for help, and the police apprehended Samuel in time. However, because the girl was a marginalized individual, her testimony was not given much weight, and Samuel was only sentenced to 3 months. Afterwards, in Missouri, Samuel continued to commit various other crimes, including an instance where another girl narrowly escaped death. Throughout that period, Samuel always targeted those on the fringes of society, such as black women or professional criminals, to carry out his crimes. He wandered across the western and southern USA, killing and robbing many victims before being caught. A girl named Marianne Jenkins testified in court in 1977. She was found in Illinois in 1994. Jolanda Jones was found in an abandoned house, unclothed and without visible injuries. Forensic doctors discovered cocaine in her blood, concluding that she had overdosed. Both cases were linked to Samuel, a criminal with a decades-long history of crime. On September 12, 1982, a murder occurred in Florida. The victim was Patricia Ann Mount, 26-year-old, found unclothed in a field with the cause of death being mechanical asphyxiation. Witnesses saw Patricia in a brown car the night before the incident. That same month, another murder took place in Mississippi, the victim being Melinda Rose Lapre, a 22-year-old prostitute. She was found in a cemetery on October 4, 1982, with numerous bruises and no clothes. Witnesses also saw her get into a brown car. A month later, police found a car matching the witnesses' descriptions, and the owner of the car was Samuel. During the trial, the prosecutor found 2 surviving prostitutes who identified Samuel as the perpetrator. However, he denied the crimes and claimed his innocence. At one point, Samuel was accused of murdering Patricia, a prostitute, but due to a lack of compelling evidence, the 12-member jury found the testimonies of the 2 prostitutes unreliable and determined Samuel was not guilty. Samuel later moved to Florida, where he was arrested by local police for theft. During the investigation, police found that Samuel's description closely matched that of Patricia's killer, linking him to the case before his arrest. At this time, Samuel was accompanied by his girlfriend and another teenager named Danny. Police interrogated the 2 individuals with Samuel. Danny revealed that Samuel had driven out alone the night Patricia disappeared, and when he sat in the back seat of the car, he noticed something strange. The car had been meticulously cleaned. Based on Danny's testimony, the police brought Samuel to trial. However, due to the lack of substantial evidence, Samuel was acquitted once again. In October 1984, he was convicted of kidnapping. After being released on bail, the police found a girl unconscious in the trunk of his car, covered in bruises. Ultimately, Samuel was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison. Samuel's story is an example of the complex and ironic events in life, where a person can be linked to multiple cases without solid evidence. In February 1987, Samuel, then 47 years old, had committed over a dozen murders in Los Angeles. A year later, his girlfriend Aurelia Jean Dorsey died of a brain hemorrhage. According to Samuel, he would always go out after his girlfriend had fallen asleep, but no one knows if she was aware of his actions. The entire timeline from Samuel's first crime to his arrest spanned over 40 years. Samuel admitted that he had killed a total of 93 people in 19 states across the USA over 35 years, all of whom were women. Samuel's victim count surpassed the total crimes committed by Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer. In December 2020, Samuel died of illness at the age of 80. Investigators examined his body and ruled out the possibility of murder, but the exact cause was not disclosed. Because Samuel had died, some of his victims remain unidentified. Their lives were cut short because they encountered a monster like Samuel. One of the 13 states of Malaysia, located in the northwest of the country and bordering the Strait of Malacca. This area is divided into 2 parts, the Penang Island and the Seberang Perai province. Penang's economy is mainly based on tourism and electronics manufacturing, and it is also known as the Pearl of the Orient and the Silicon Valley of the East. On the southern side of Penang Island, there is a small town called Batu Maung, which is a fishing port where fishermen come ashore daily to unload their catch and distribute it across the country. In this town, there is an ordinary family living headed by 50-year-old Mr. To Hock Chun, who currently manages a livestock slaughterhouse. He lives together with his wife, Miss Tan Saw Sim, who is a few years older than him. They have been living together for a long time, but they are not married and do not have any children together. Before meeting Mr. To Hock Chun, Miss Tan Saw Sim had 3 children from her previous marriage. On a night in July 2016, a horrific incident occurred with this family, shocking the entire nation of Malaysia. The incident took place on June 16, 2016, which was during the Durian Festival, an annual event held in Malaysia from early June to late July to celebrate the bountiful durian harvest. At 2:45 p.m. in a chicken slaughterhouse on Jalan Beringin Road in Batu Maung, 15 workers were diligently working since early morning with the loud sounds of machinery echoing throughout the facility. Some workers were even wearing headphones and safety goggles to prevent the splatter of debris during the chicken slaughtering process. Each worker had a specific task, such as plucking feathers, slaughtering, sorting, and packaging, all ensuring the quality of the products and maintaining efficiency. In a corner of the wall, not far away, a few mice were scurrying around searching for food, along with a few geckos crawling around the machinery. At that time, a very unusual incident was secretly occurring inside the slaughterhouse. The workers were still engrossed in their everyday tasks. They had also grown accustomed to the rather arduous and not so clean working environment. To keep up with the schedule in this slaughterhouse, working through the night was a normal occurrence, and the workers had become used to it. At 3 a.m., the workers were still diligently working, but they gradually realized that something was amiss. Mr. To-hak Chun, the boss who usually went out to chat with people and check on the work progress, had not shown up today. To investigate this unusual situation, some workers discussed among themselves and decided to go to the boss's office to check on the situation. The boss's office was very close, right in the container house within the slaughterhouse. Afterward, a few workers temporarily paused their work and went there together. When they pushed open the office door, a horrifying scene immediately came into view, shocking them all. The boss's entire family of 4 had been brutally murdered. The scene was overwhelmed by the pungent smell of fresh blood, and the sight of the gruesome deaths was devastating. Faced with this sudden and horrifying scene, some of the more timid workers even let out screams of terror, and the images of the bloodied bodies were seared into their minds. After calming down, they immediately called the police emergency number 999. The wailing of the police sirens soon shattered the tranquility of the early Saturday morning. A large police force arrived quickly to cordon off the entire crime scene. The slaughterhouse was set up in a simple, well-ventilated tin-roofed warehouse with many cages of chickens piled outside. The investigators began to examine the crime scene from the main gate to the backyard, as well as some of the still operating machinery. After walking along the road into the interior, at the end of the road, there is a 2-story tin house converted from 4 shipping containers. The first floor and second floor have several bedrooms, all with ventilation pipes and ample lighting thanks to the windows. According to the instructions of some police workers, the office and bedroom of the owner are on the first floor behind the red and blue tin partition. When the investigators entered the house, they were attacked by a pungent smell of fresh blood that stung their noses. In the office, many chairs were overturned on the floor, and in the hallway, a middle-aged man was lying motionless under the staircase. Not far away, a young man and a child were also lying motionless on the floor. The door to the first-floor bedroom was wide open, and the scene inside was completely chaotic. In the room, a middle-aged woman was lying motionless on the bed, surrounded by blood that looked extremely tragic. The identities of the 4 victims were quickly determined. They were the homeowner, To-hak Chun, age 50, his wife, Tan-saw Sim, age 55, their youngest son, Chung Wa-tong, age 28, and Chung I-dae, age 2, Chung Wa-tong's eldest son. The family of the son did not live at the slaughterhouse, but occasionally came to visit the mother and stepfather and stayed for a few days. On the day of the incident, Chung Wa-tong happened to bring his child here, but little did he know that the father and son would face such a tragic fate. According to the investigation results, the victims were shot a total of 6 times, leading to their immediate deaths at the scene. The perpetrator used a Smith & Wesson revolver from the US, and the police found 11 bullet casings at the scene. The owner, To-hak Chun, who was directly managing the slaughterhouse, was shot by the perpetrator in the office, hitting his arm, and the serious injury was a bullet in his chest. Meanwhile, Tan-saw Sim, who was resting on the first floor of the house, was also shot and killed on the spot by the perpetrator. The perpetrator did not stop there and also executed Chung Wa-tong and his not even 2-year-old son. After committing the bloody murder, the perpetrator calmly drove away from the scene as if nothing had happened. Based on the security camera footage, the police discovered that at 2:45 a.m. that night, a man had barged into Mr. To-hak Chun's office. Moreover, they had a heated argument, and then the man suddenly left only to return shortly after with a gun in his hand. He brazenly entered and shot Mr. To-hak Chun, then proceeded to the first-floor bedroom and shot and killed Mrs. Tan-saw Sim, who was sleeping on the bed. At that time, Chung Wa-tong heard the gunshots and rushed down to check, and his young son also curiously followed him. When the perpetrator heard footsteps of people coming down, he immediately hid and ambushed them. As soon as the father and son reached the spot, the perpetrator opened fire, killing both of them. The police quickly identified the murderer as Chung Chun-hwa, the elder son of Mrs. Tan-saw Sim. The news of this incident has caused a major shock throughout the Batu Maung region, making the local people feel extremely unsafe and fearful of the brutality and cruelty of the murderer. They are worried that they might be the next victims of the shooting rampage. The blood relationship between the perpetrator and the deceased has left everyone heartbroken, and the motive behind the crime remains a mystery. As the investigation progressed, more details were uncovered. Chung Chun-hwa was born in 1984 in Penang, Malaysia. At the time of the incident, he was 32 years old, living a drifting life and with a habit of using drugs. Since childhood, Chung Chun Hua had exhibited a rebellious character, not only disobeying his family's teachings, but also joining the local gang. He often skipped school to fight, which led to him being shunned by his friends, and from there he started using drugs, and whenever he ran out of money, he would go to the slaughterhouse to ask his mother and stepfather for money. Although she knew her son amounted to nothing, the mother still loved and indulged him and met his financial needs. Not long before the incident, she had bought him a motorcycle in the hope that he could earn money by driving a motorbike taxi. However, Chung Chun Hua did not appreciate his mother's good intentions and found it too much trouble, instead selling the motorcycle and using the money to buy a gun from the black market. Occasionally, he would even bring the gun to the slaughterhouse to show off to the workers, even letting them borrow it to take photos. After the incident, some neighbors told the police that Chung Chun Hua often had an arrogant, overbearing attitude, erratic temper, and was rude to his parents. Whenever he came home, he would extort money from his parents, and if they refused, he would argue and be impertinent. He never helped with the family's business operations and never thought about needing to contribute anything to the family. Chung Hua Tong's wife recounted that they had just gotten married and moved out, so they only visited the father-in-law and mother-in-law's slaughterhouse occasionally. However, this time when they visited, the husband and son were tragically murdered. Previously, the Chung Hua Tong family had no relationship with Chung Chun Hua due to the extremely tense relationship between the two brothers. Chung Chun Hua was known to be a lazy person who only lived off the support of his family, and he was also a liar and untrustworthy. The police guessed that Chung Chun Hua may have committed the crime because he could not get money to buy drugs, causing him to lose control and shoot his family members. According to the investigation, Chung Chun Hua had a criminal history, especially related to drug trafficking, so the police determined that he was the murderer in this case. The police have been hunting for Chung Chun Hua based on clues about the car he was driving at the time of the incident. When they found the car parked in a public parking lot, they laid in wait for Chung Chun Hua to appear, but it seems he has fled. The car was parked about 25 km away from the crime scene, and when checked, the car door was unlocked and the key was still in the ignition. Later, the police received a report that around 1 p.m. on the day of the Chung Chun Hua case, he had unexpectedly visited the house of his uncle in Kampung Melayu, Penang, located 13 kilometers north of the chicken slaughterhouse. The police suspect that the perpetrator intentionally parked his car in the Bukit Mertajam area to divert attention and disrupt the police investigation, while also creating an opportunity for himself to return to Penang to hide. Chung Chun Hua's sudden appearance had terrified his uncle's entire household. On that day, when they heard knocking at the door, his cousin opened it. Taking advantage of the situation, he barged into the house and demanded that his uncle give him money, while also warning the entire household not to contact the police or reveal his whereabouts, or else they would be killed. He even threatened that if he had the chance, he would return to kill his biological father and sister-in-law. Afterward, he went upstairs and hid in a room, not coming out. At that time, in addition to the uncle and aunt, there were two other relatives visiting. Not long after, his cousin, hearing about the commotion in the house, sent a text message to friends calling for help and reporting the matter to the police. Although threatened by Chung Chun Hua, the household remained calm and discreetly left the house successfully, fortunately without making any noise that could have aroused his suspicion. Afterward, when he went downstairs, he found the house empty, quickly took the uncle's car keys and drove to the Air Itam suburb and bought a phone top-up card. During this process, he encountered an acquaintance neighbor who advised him to turn himself in, but he did not react and quickly left. At 4 p.m. on July 17, 2016, the day after the incident, Chung Chun Hua continued to drive around the area. He went to visit the Kek Lok Si Temple, the largest Buddhist temple in Malaysia, and an important pilgrimage center for Buddhists from Hong Kong, the Philippines, Singapore, and other parts of Southeast Asia. Many people wonder how a cold-blooded murderer like Chung Chun Hua could have known about the temple to pray. Perhaps after the horrific incident, he felt his conscience pricking him and wanted to go to the temple to atone to the Buddha, and at the same time pray for the souls of his deceased loved ones to rest in peace and be liberated. However, the truth about Chung Chun Hua's state of mind at the time is unknown to anyone. As he was driving down the mountain and passing by a 7-Eleven convenience store, his car suddenly broke down, forcing him to pull over and wait for the engine to cool down to inspect it. At that time, he was wearing a cap, mask, and dark glasses, and then walked to a nearby snack area to buy items. Some people even saw him buying sugarcane juice, laksa, and other dishes. During that time, the police had tracked Chung Chun-Hwa's movements, so they had secretly set up an ambush around the area. About 3 hours later, he appeared at the parking spot, opened the car door to check the engine, and was preparing to drive off. At this moment, the police officers who were in ambush around the area suddenly appeared and surrounded his car right in front of the cafe. Initially, the police tried to negotiate with Chung Chun-Hwa, but when one of the officers approached him, he suddenly pulled out a gun from the car and aimed it at the police. This action left the police with no opportunity for further negotiation. The other officers immediately opened fire in retaliation, and after more than 10 gunshots, Chung Chun-Hwa was shot dead on the spot. Perhaps this was the price he had to pay for the karmic consequences of his previous actions. The gun he used to resist the police was the same one that had taken the lives of 4 of his own family members. Fortunately, the arrest process did not involve any conflict between the two sides, and no police officers were injured in the shootout. After each sensational case that comes to light, public discussion and shock ensue, but the most heartbreaking are the cases of family murder, especially when children kill their own parents. These are truly unpredictable tragedies. To prevent such situations, local primary schools have stepped up propaganda and education of children about the immeasurable harm of drugs from a young age in an effort to prevent similar tragedies. How do you feel about this case? Please leave a comment so we can discuss together. If this case has left an impression on you, don't hesitate to like and subscribe to our channel to support us. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.